They did me dirty. My best friend and my wife framed me for arson so they could steal my company, my freedom, and my name. My name's Hank Mercer. I'm 58 years old. And this is the story of how I took everything back without firing a shot. Just a whole lot of patience, paper trails, and a little country boy cunning. I learned how to hold a grudge in a place where time moves like syrup. 2 a.m., prison laundry, steam rolling off industrial machines, bleach stinging your nose till your eyes water. Nights like that, you talk to ghosts. Not the dead kind, the living ones. The folks you used to be before somebody rewrote your life. Before I tell you how I finally get freedom, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Also hit that like and subscribe button. I used to be the guy with sawdust in his hair and a shop that smelled like cedar and glue. I built cabinets folks bragged about, the kind you run your hand along just to feel the grain. I had a partner I would have taken a bullet for, and a wife who kept my coffee hot and my calendar straight. Then I had a gas can with my fingerprints on it, a burned-to-the-bones warehouse, and a cell. I'm going to tell you exactly how we got there. But first, let me reach my hand out across the screen and shake yours, because if you've ever been blindsided in this life, by a friend, by family, by fate, you're sitting right here with me. Pull up a chair. Waffle House rules. What's said at the booth stays at the booth. I'm going to show you how revenge ain't about rage. It's about arithmetic. I grew up in Buckthorn, Missouri. It's a speck on the map where the Casey's Pizza is better than anybody will admit, where you can still borrow a pickup and return it on fumes if you promise a pan of brownies later. Me and Tucker Lane were the kind of friends that small towns produce like a crop. Started in T-ball, graduated to hunting season and prom night cover stories. We both learned the trades early, me on wood, Tucker on books. I could turn a board into a showpiece. He could turn a shoebox of receipts into a ledger that sang. We started Mercer and Lane Millworks when we were 26. By 40, we were the go-to guys for every custom kitchen between Columbia and Kansas City. We had our names on the little brass plaques inside drawers. Folks'd open one just to see. We were that kind of petty proud. Linda kept the front office humming. Linda was my wife, not Tucker's. She had a laugh like melted butter and a way of calming people down on the phone. If a customer came in breathing fire, they'd leave asking if we needed anything from Costco. I thought we were a three-legged stool, sturdy and steady. Enter Colby Rains. Real estate big shot. If you ever seen a man whose teeth are just a little too white for his face, you know the type. He came into our shop one afternoon in a suit that cost more than our table saw. Said he was building Riverbend Commons. Big mixed-use honey trap by the highway. Needed premium storefronts. Needed them yesterday. Said we'd be partners in growth, brand ambassadors, the whole 9 yards. His handshake felt like a hotel room you can't quite get comfortable in. Tucker loved him. "This is it, Hank," he said, bouncing like a kid at Christmas. "This puts us on the map." Me, I liked slow and steady. Our waiting list was already longer than my patience. But there's something about having your best friend so sure, and your wife nodding along, and the numbers on the page looking like a rocket. I said yes. First red flag. 2 weeks in, an advance purchase contract with a clause I didn't like. We'd do the first wave of build-outs at a loss to establish footprint. Tucker said it was a marketing expense. He was the numbers. I was the sawdust. We signed. Second red flag. Rains accidentally brought Linda coffee twice when I wasn't around. All smiles and eye contact. She brushed it off, made a joke. I brushed it off too. Stupid. Third red flag was a whisper on a Friday night. I was leaving the shop late, and I heard laughter in the office, intimate low. I froze halfway down the hall. Couldn't make out words, just tone. Then a chair scraped, and by the time I opened the door, it was empty and the room smelled like her perfume. They never teach you how to swallow that feeling. You either become a detective or a fool. I chose something worse, a believer. I told myself not to be jealous of my own wife. I chose trust because it was easier. The fire hit on a windy March night, dry as tinder. The alarm company called me at 1:17 a.m. My heart went sideways. I drove over cussing and praying, cut off sweatshirt and boots and no socks, wind bucking the truck like it was mad at me. When I turned the corner, there it was, orange against the sky like a mouth. Our place. Doors belching heat. Sawdust system screaming like a jet engine. And right across the alley, old Mr. Carver's salvage shop, buried in embers. He lived in a cot in the back sometimes, on account of his wife having passed and his house being too quiet. There were sirens, neighbors in bathrobes, my stomach on the pavement. Tucker showed up too fast. Linda was already there, hair down, cheeks flushed like she'd run. She grabbed my arm, so hard it went numb. "Hank," she said, "your truck. Did you come back earlier? Someone saw your taillights." That was a weird thing to ask a man watching his life burn. I didn't answer. I watched the roof fall like a bad magic trick. The firemen worked like heroes. But they pulled Mr. Carver out with a sheet over his face. And that's when my brain started chewing on gears. Because I knew the way our dust collection worked. I knew where solvents were supposed to be. I knew what a fire like that should look like, and what it shouldn't. And this looked fed. I told myself I'd figure it out. I told myself we'd rebuild and honor Mr. Carver. I told myself a lot of things that night. 3 days later, Detective Margot Clay knocked on my door. She had a jawline like she could take a punch and a voice like she'd give one back. She sat at my kitchen table and lined up photos like coasters. There was a gas confound behind our shop with my prints. There were financial red flags, suggesting we were drowning and had motive for the insurance. There was my truck near the shop at midnight, captured on a convenience store camera. And there was what she didn't say, but I felt in the room. Somebody had fed her a story. I told her about Rains, about the claws, about our workload, about how my prints were everywhere because I filled those cans for the mower and our contractor heater a dozen times. She nodded like a teacher who's seen the homework copied. When she left, my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't pour coffee. I went to the shop, the blackened skeleton of it. I stood at the caution tape and made myself breathe. That's when I saw it. The cap on the dust collector hatch was wired open. Not broken open, wired open, with baling wire the way a farmer holds a gate when the hinge is gone. I'm not an arson investigator, but I know our machines. That cap being open turned the whole building into a flute for fire. I took a picture. I sent it to Tucker. He didn't respond. I went to see him. Didn't answer. I went home. Linda was packing a bag. "What is this?" I asked, calm like my insides weren't trying to sprint out my ears. She looked at me like a stranger. "I can't do this, Hank." That's what she said. Not this as in marriage. This as in being tied to a case. To Ash. To consequence. "Who's we?" I asked. She didn't answer. I watched her put my life into a duffel bag like it was a weekend trip. She took the wedding photo off the mantle and left the frame. That detail, right there, stuck in my brain like a tack. It told me exactly what I needed to know about what part of me she loved. The indictment came 2 weeks later. Arson resulting in death. I didn't get to say much at trial because my own lawyer told me to be quiet and let the process work. The prosecutor was slick. He made our insurance policy sound like a motive. He made my prints sound like a smoking gun. There was testimony, hand to God, about me being agitated about money the week before, from a kid who used to work Saturdays and stacked plywood crooked. There was a printout of a text from my phone to Tucker's. "Check the solvent order. Too much last month." They blew that up on a screen like I'd confessed in blood. And there was Linda, hair pulled back, soft voice, saying I'd been distant, that I'd talked a lot about cutting losses. Watching her on that stand was like watching your own truck roll away with the parking brake off. You want to jump in front of it, and you know you'd lose. I got 12 years. "We'll appeal," my lawyer said, but he blinked when he said it like he didn't believe his own mouth. They led me out in cuffs. I watched the gallery. Tucker wasn't there. Rains wasn't there. Linda didn't look up. In prison, you can either rot or you can study. I chose to study. Not law exactly, though I read enough case law to make my eyes bleed. I studied people. Who owes who? Who lies easy? Who looks you in the eye when they tell half a story? The redemption world is full of bumper stickers about forgiveness. I'm not going to lie to you. I wasn't there. Forgiveness felt like letting a thief keep your wallet so you wouldn't hurt his feelings. But revenge has a smell like fresh rain on dust. It's not hot, not when it's done right. It's a cool thing, a clean thing. My teachers were an odd bunch. Manny was a jailhouse lawyer who could quote the statute numbers like sports stats. Doc was a fallen accountant who knew how shell companies breed like rabbits. Red was a nerdy grandpa who could make a county clerk's database sing. Then there was Tiny, a former firefighter with shoulders like a refrigerator. He taught me how fires talk. They got dialects, he said. You listen to how a flame walked across a floor. You hear what fed it. We sat at a table under buzzing lights, tracing burn patterns on napkins. I showed him the photo of the wired-open dust cap. He whistled low. Somebody wanted that fire to breathe, he said. At night, I'd write everything I could remember, like I was making my own black box recording. Who had keys? What orders went in? Who got coffee? What Linda smelled like when she came home late. I wrote down Tucker's jokes. I wrote down Rain's phrases. The words we use are fingerprints. I didn't know how those notes would help yet. Only that someday I'd need a perfect map of the world they broke. Year 6, something changed. Manny brought me a case, State versus Leggett, where the Missouri Sunshine Law forced a county to cough up all kinds of emails. Stupid, petty emails that sank a whole bribery ring. That night, Red showed me how to write a records request that nobody could ignore. Tiny showed me where my fire didn't match the report. And Doc unfolded a napkin and drew a tree. If someone profits, he said, tapping the trunk, the money has to travel through branches. They don't throw cash in the air and hope it lands in their swimsuit. Watch the LLCs, Hank. Watch for names like Hawthorne and Pine and Ridge. Rich folks love nature words when they're stealing. I sent letters to my niece Ronnie. Veronica, really, but she was always Ronnie to me. She was a marketing savage in St. Louis who did campaigns for soda, sneakers, and whatever else needed to look cool. I asked if she could run a website for me someday, secret-like. She said yes before I could explain, because family that believes in you is a miracle you don't question. Year 9, a blessing snuck in wearing sneakers. There was a non-profit clinic that put dogs in the system to sleep with the inmates. Program's a thing in a lot of places now. They gave me a pit mix with a scar on his muzzle and eyes like an apology. I named him Cedar. He listened better than most men I knew. Every night I'd scratch his chest and tell him about my shop like he'd been there. He'd put his head on my knee and huff like, "Go on, get it out, man." I know this sounds corny, but that dog kept me human. You need something pure next to you if you're going to walk through hell and come back with all your pieces. Year 10, a storm rolled in with a name. Riverbend Commons grand opening. Mayor's ribbon cutting. I saw the headline in the paper they'd pass around the unit. There was a photo of Rains beaming next to a man with a wave and a wink. Tucker Lane, the new director of the Buckthorn Economic Development Commission. He'd cut his hair, but I recognized the eyes. The article said he'd steered the town through a challenging rebuild season following the tragic Mercer and Lane fire. I sat there with my breakfast tray cooling and felt something I can only describe as cold lightning. The kind that splits a tree clean. Revenge had an address now. Here's the thing about getting out. Nobody knows what day you'll leave to the hour until you're actually walking. It's a safety thing. For me, parole came on a Wednesday I didn't see coming, like a surprise party you didn't ask for. They gave me a bus ticket and a plastic bag with my belt inside. I hugged Cedar like he was a person. They said, "Don't get in trouble." I said, "I already did." I got a room at the roadway in by the highway and a job mopping floors in the county building at night, because work is work and I needed to be near the thermostat of local power. I wore an orange maintenance polo and pushed a cart with paper towels and spray bottles and a heart full of very calm hate. I learned which door the city attorney used. I learned which cubicle the water commission intern napped in. And once a week, in the file room, I stood by an old scanner and fed it pages until my phone was full. Every public memo. Every email that slid through. Sunshine Law is a beautiful thing when you know how to hold it by the handle. Ronnie built me a ghost. We registered a nonprofit with a smiley website called Prairie Sun Foundation, with a mission statement so warm you could toast marshmallows on it. Bridging rural communities and sustainable development. We had photos of kids at a river cleanup, a retired farmer installing solar panels, a golden retriever in a bandana because that's what the internet trusts. We bought a domain. We made it look like $1 million. Then we made another ghost. Ridge and Hawthorne Consulting, with a logo so boring it had to be real. Doc helped make the paperwork sing. Red gave me burner emails. Tiny laughed and shook his head. "You fixing to float him over the falls," he said. "Gently," I said. "A guided tour." I needed bait. I picked the one thing men like Rains and Tucker can't resist. Free money attached to a plaque. Prairie Sun announced a rural renewal grant. $3 million to seed a craftsman incubator in a town that had lost its manufacturing base. Buckthorn qualified like a lottery ticket. We invited applications and reached out to the Economic Development Commission, where, surprise, Tucker was eager to lead a bid. I shaved. I put on a thrift store suit. I drove to the meeting in a borrowed Prius because optics are cheaper than gasoline, and I walked into that community room where the cookies are always stale and the coffee tastes like hot paper. Tucker stood at the front with a PowerPoint and ambition. I waited in the back. When his eyes found mine, he flinched, just a hair. Then he pasted on his public smile. My name was not on the guest list because my name wasn't Hank there. Prairie Sun had sent its regional outreach coordinator. One Nathan Hawk, a man with a vague past and a crisp shirt. That was me. He shook my hand. I watched his pupils track me like a dog clocking a squirrel. "Mr. Hawk," he said, voice smooth. "Welcome to Buckthorn." "Please," I said. "Call me Nate." While Tucker laid out the plan, I smiled and took notes like my opinion mattered. The plan was slick. Repurpose the old rail depot into a makerspace, leverage tax credits, fold in private capital from Riverbend Commons. My Ghost Foundation would match funds if the city signed a memorandum of understanding to guarantee favorable zoning and accelerate permits. That memo was our tripwire. Afterwards, Tucker cornered me by the donut table. "I didn't know you worked for Prairie Sun," he said. He was fishing. I gave him bait. "Newish gig," I said. "We love plucky towns with stories. You've got a good story here, Mr. Lane." He was good. He didn't ask if my name was Hank. He didn't blink at the salt white hair at my temples. He asked about due diligence. I promised a site visit. He asked about timelines. I mentioned pilot disbursements. I watched his throat move when he swallowed. Fear and greed share that swallow. It's like watching a man choose between two doors. At home, the motel TV murmured about ball games while I wrapped rubber bands around stacks of photocopies. Building code variances, late-night emails between Rains and a councilman named Dalrymple, press releases drafted before votes. Ronnie cleaned up my drafts and built a press kit. Red sent me an invoice template from Ridge and Hawthorne to bill consulting to Riverbend Commons Development Group LLC. On the bottom, wire instructions to an account that wasn't mine but sure looked like Buckthorn's Golden Boys. It led to a bank Doc told me to watch. He'd put a sticky note on the napkin tree years ago. "Archway Community Bank, asks no questions as long as the paperwork dances." Meanwhile, I filed a sunshine request for the Arson Lab's full report. The first time they said no. Privacy, active litigation, blah blah. Manny drafted me a letter so polite it felt like a slap with a feather. As the convict in question, I waived my privacy rights. Please either produce or cite specific exemptions by subsection. 2 weeks later, I had the files. Tiny and I sat in the diner at the edge of town with highlighters, grease on our hands from 2 cheeseburgers. He traced the burn patterns, the negative pressure, the accelerant tests. "This ain't how your fire ran," he said. "Looky here, the highest heat damage is opposite the dust collector. That cap being open made a flute, like you said, but something else fed it on the east wall." We drove to the remains that night. I stood where my table saw used to be. He paced it out. "Solvent shelf," he said. "This is where it danced harder." Then he pointed at the char path near the back door. "And this is where the arsonist left like he owned the joint. We came at Tucker sideways. I didn't send cops. I sent his own words." The Sunshine Dump coughed up emails from 6 months before the fire. Him and Rains jawing about a strategic reset and transitioning the asset. That was fancy talk for burn it and collect. There was a spreadsheet in there too, with line items that made my skin go tight. Insurance payout assumptions, cost of rebuild, alternative site, one-time personnel savings. My name had a number next to it. When a friend turns you into math, it does something permanent to your bones. The memorandum of understanding slid in front of the city council on a rainy Tuesday. Tucker needed 3 votes. He had 2 pocketed. He needed Dalrymple. Lives on the golf course, belly like a turtle shell. I knew because I mopped his footprints off the county building marble twice a week. Prairie Sun would award the grant upon signature. Except we weren't awarding squat. We were catching hands. At noon, while they ate sub sandwiches and pretended to read, I sent an email blast from Prairie Sun announcing finalist towns with glossy photos. Buckthorn was on there, of course. So were 3 other towns that didn't exist. Just handsome Americana stock photos. That's called an inducement in my book. In theirs, it's called momentum. At 12:11 p.m., I sent a second package. Not an email, a stack of paper, couriered to the River County Ledger. Attention, Sabine Torres. Sabine is a reporter who doesn't blink. She wrote about the flood of '02 when it took half the mobile park. She wrote about the school levy. She wrote like she bled ink. Inside the package were 2 swing votes texts with Rains about expediting fees, and a printout of a bank login page with the Ridge and Hawthorne invoice paid, stamped done. A note on top. Ever seen a ghost take a bribe? I put the Sunshine statute in there in case their lawyer forgot. At 12:20 p.m., I sent a third thing. A video to the generic city email, CC'd to everyone, from the mayor to the parks guy who waters the mums. It was a quiet video of me in a suit, my face shadowed enough to confuse. I said, "Before you sign, ask Mr. Lane to explain the night of March 17, 2014, and why his passcode opened the back door at 11:58 p.m. That last part wasn't guesswork. Tiny pulled the access logs months ago, sloppy IT leaving them hanging on a server like laundry. There it was in black and white, plain exit door reader 2358. He was in my shop when my life got set to torch. I kept my phone on silent and ate a ham sandwich like I wasn't vibrating. At 12:47 p.m., Buckthorn City Hall stopped pretending. The emergency meeting paused. Councilman went white around the lips. Tucker texted me from a burn number. "We need to talk." That old fury rose in me like a wave. I took a breath and answered like Nate Hawk. Happy to coordinate a response. Transparency is our brand. Sabine went live online at 1:12 p.m. with a headline that hit like a bat. Leaked emails suggest bribery in Buckthorn Grant push. New questions in 2014 Mercer and Lane fire. Folks started sharing it faster than gossip spreads when a casserole burns. Within 20 minutes, I had moms who never voted retweeting Sunshine Law subsections like legal scholars. God bless the internet when it stands up straight. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Revenge will fool you into thinking it's a fireworks show. It's not. It's a ledger balancing. At sunset, I got the call I'd been waiting on for 10 years, and it didn't come from a cop. It came from Linda. Funny how a voice can reach across a decade and yank you backward. She sounded small. "Hank," she said. "Not Nate. Please don't do this." "Do what?" I asked, light as a paper plate. "Ask questions. File requests. Tell the truth." "It's not what you think," she said. "Sweetheart," I said, and the word came out without my permission. "It's exactly what I think." "We were drowning," she said. "He said the insurance would float us. He said no one would get hurt. Except an old man who slept in a back room," I said. Silence on the other end. The kind that has the shape of a hand over a mouth. "I didn't know about Carver," she whispered. I swear to God. I believed she didn't know, because I'd seen the way Tucker loved to keep the nasty parts in his pocket. Control was his drug of choice. "You took the stand," I said. "You lied with a steady voice. I thought," she stopped. "I thought you'd forgive me after. I thought we'd rebuild, and I thought a lot of stupid things. You thought you'd trade me for an easier story," I said. "You married a man who made things with his hands, and you sold him for words on paper. I'm not calling you to the stand again, Linda. I'm calling you to quiet. Think about who you want to be when this is done. That's all you got left." "Will they go to prison?" she asked, voice pitched high and tight. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. But you won't get to be the version of yourself you've been pretending to be. That's a different kind of sentence." After I hung up, I sat on the motel bed and watched the cigarette burn on the nightstand someone else had left. Cedar wasn't there to put his chin on my knee, but I could almost feel the weight. I told the empty room the thing I hadn't said out loud. I don't need them in orange jumpsuits. I need the world to see what they are. The next morning, the Ledger ran a follow-up. Arson expert questions official fire narrative. Tiny went on record. He said phrases like accelerants, unusual ventilation, chain of custody. He didn't point at Tucker by name because Tiny's a pro, but he laid a path like a row of arrow signs on a highway. That afternoon, Sabine published access logs from the night of the fire, and there was Mr. Tlain time-stamped. Folks started connecting dots without help. That's the best revenge. When you don't have to preach because the choir starts singing without you. Rains did what men like him always do. He lawyered up and went to ground. His PR flack tried a press release about baseless claims fueled by online speculation, which would have worked if he hadn't also accidentally CC'd a draft with insert emotional anecdote here to 50 people. Buckthorn loves a good bonfire. They love a PR flub more. A week later, the State Arson Bureau reopened my case. Detective Clay showed up where I worked, now in a different suit with a different kind of respect. She stood by my mop bucket and looked me in the eyes. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "we might have gotten it wrong. I'll give her this. It takes guts to say it out loud." I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I said, "Ma'am, if you pull the thread, it all comes loose." She pulled. Turns out, the gas can with my prints was found by a volunteer who was Tucker's cousin. Turns out, the solvent shelf had an empty space where a 5-gallon drum should have been, and that invoice had been paid in cash by a man matching Tucker's billed on a grainy camera from a supply yard off Highway 7. Turns out, the access log was real and the storage server date stamps lined up. Turns out, Rains had 5 LLCs that paid each other like a shell game at a county fair. I didn't go to Tucker's house. I never laid fingers on his front door. I did invite him somewhere, though. Old-timers would call it a reckoning place. The burned-out shell of our shop, now a weedy lot with a busted fence. I left a note in his mailbox. Last walkthrough. Tuesday, 5 p.m. There's a brand of man who can't resist a dramatic appointment. Tucker was that brand. He came in a navy blazer and expensive shoes that sank a little in the dirt. I stood where our assembly table used to be. The light was good that time of day. He walked across the lot like he owned every inch. We sized each other up like boxers who used to spar. "You could have come to me," he said softly. "We were family." "You burned family," I said. "You salted the ground." "Don't use that word like a Band-Aid." He put his hands up, palms out. "You don't understand how close we were to losing everything." The bank was circling. Rains promised you a title," I said. "It landed." He flinched. "He promised you a seat at the grown-up table. And you traded a life for a chair." He looked down. When he looked up, there was something like the truth in his face for the first time in 10 years. "I didn't know Carver was sleeping there," he said. "I swear on my mother." "You knew enough to wire that hatch open," I said. "You knew enough to leave the back at 11:58 and text me something about a supply run, so I'd go the other way." He cocked his head. "How'd you?" "Because I'm not you," I said. "I remember the sound of my wife laughing in our office when I was supposed to be in the shop. I remember you showing up to the fire too fast. I remember your oh-no face and how your hands were too clean." I stepped closer. "And because you signed your name in a few too many places a few too many times. You forgot the old carpentry rule, Tuck. Measure twice, cut once. You measured once and cut me out." He looked older up close. Victory hadn't suited him. "So what now?" he asked. There was a tremor in it. "You gonna break my nose?" "Go ahead. You earned it." "Nah," I said. "I'm gonna let you do what you do best, talk." I pointed to the edge of the lot where a white van idled. The River County Ledger logo was on the side. Cameras were already rolling. Detective Clay stood by her car, arms folded. Councilmen pretended to be out for a stroll like kids who walked past the girls' locker room on purpose. And there, under a patch of sky, with the ghost of a shop watching, I told him the one true thing revenge demands. "Say your name out loud and what you did." He swallowed. The tendons in his neck jumped. He looked at the camera. "I'm Tucker Lane," he said quietly, and then louder like a man on the witness stand. "And I set in motion something I couldn't control. I was selfish. I let a man I loved go to prison. I didn't expect it. Maybe he thought an apology would cut his legal exposure. Maybe he thought saying it would make it smaller. Maybe for a second, he actually felt it. Doesn't matter. Truth has weight. It fell out of him and onto the ground between us. You could hear it. Councilman Dalrymple went down next with a resignation that read like a sorority breakup letter. Rains slipped on his own greed and fell into a federal indictment net big enough to catch a tuna. Linda lost her real estate license after the board reviewed her testimony and the credibility concerns surrounding it. The state reversed my conviction with language so clipped you could shave with it. Newly discovered evidence undermines confidence in the verdict. They didn't apologize. The state never does. But the judge looked me in the eyes and said, "Mr. Mercer, you are free to go anywhere you like." I walked outside and stood in the sun that afternoon like a farm boy on a first date. I could smell cut grass and gasoline from a mower 3 yards over. It made me ache and grin at the same time. Buckthorn being Buckthorn, they threw me a barbecue I didn't want. But I went, because sometimes you let people love you even when you're not in the mood. Little league teams raised their bats when I walked by like a sword salute. Mrs. Haney from the bakery hugged me until my ribs creaked. Kids chased each other between lawn chairs while their parents said, "Awful thing," and "whole mess." I ate potato salad with too much mustard, and I said thank you 100 times. It was not closure. Closure's a TV word. It was community, which is better. The settlement came not long after. A civil suit against the city, the insurer, a negligent department, 3 men who cut corners like origami. Money's never justice, but it buys doors. I used it to open one I'd wanted since the first night I walked the prison yard listening to the clang of gates. I bought a squat brick building near the highway and painted the sign by hand, Mercer Trade. Inside, we teach carpentry, welding, and electric to guys and girls with records, folks who got wronged and folks who did wrong and are trying to build something straight. You'd be amazed what happened when a 22-year-old, who's only been told he's trouble, makes a dovetail joint by himself. He stands taller. He looks you in the eye. He says, "Look what I made." And for a second, his whole life is a door he can walk through. Cedar came to live with me, too. The program that placed him inside allowed certain releases. I filled out forms and stood up straight, and did not cry in front of the officer when they handed me his leash. At home, he circled the shop and sneezed like sawdust made him emotional. He sleeps on a cot in my office that used to be a prison bunk. Some things you reclaim on purpose. As for Linda, she left Buckthorn. I heard she went to Springfield, then maybe Dallas. We spoke once more. She said, "I wish I had been the kind of person who stayed." I said, "Me too." I didn't say I forgave her, because that word's too easy to throw like confetti. What I did was smaller and maybe braver. I let go of needing her to hurt. Sometimes revenge looks like pain. Sometimes it looks like no longer letting somebody live rent-free in your head. Tucker took a plea. He'll do time in a federal camp with a library and a racquetball court. It's not the movies. There are no dramatic shank scenes. He'll do this. He will wake up at 6 a.m., count off, make a bed tight as a drum, and think about how good it felt to sign someone else's name to a fall. He'll smell laundry bleach and think of wood glue and choke on it. Maybe he'll come out different. Maybe he won't. That part ain't on me. Rains. Men like Rains always land on another yacht unless you make their name too expensive to hire. Sabine did that. She kept peeling. She found 3 other towns. She found a construction company that always seemed to snag contracts where he smiled on ribbon-cutting day. She made him radioactive. He'll sit in court one day and hear a sentence that includes the word years. Or he'll glide away to Florida and get gout. The math catches up either way. Folks ask me if revenge felt good. They ask in a whisper, like it's a dirty word. Here's the truth. In the moment, it felt like stepping onto dry land after a long swim. I didn't pump my fist. I didn't cackle. I stood still and let my feet be heavy and cheap again. I felt a thing go quiet inside me that had been rattling for a decade. That quiet's worth more than fireworks. On Sunday nights, around 6, I still drive past the empty lot where Mercer and Lane used to be. I park across the street and sit with Cedar and a cup of coffee that's too hot. I look at that ground and imagine a building that'll sit there one day. A little museum of honest work, maybe, with a plaque that doesn't mention me. Just a sentence. Built by hands that refused to quit. I picture kids on a field trip running fingers along old tools while someone tells them a story about fire and truth and patience. Then I drive home and prep Monday lesson plans. There's nothing sexy about life going on. But it's my favorite part of revenge, the part where you get yours back. If you walk beside me this whole way, thanks for sticking around. If somebody ever tried to write you out of your own story, hear me. You don't get back at them by going wild. You get back by going patient, by looking for the branch that holds the money, by reading the emails, by remembering the smell of the room they broke, and rebuilding one that's better. If this hit you in the chest today, drop a comment and tell me what door you're walking through next. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that blood ain't the only kind of family and truth ain't the only kind of justice. And if you want more stories about the extraordinary hiding in the ordinary, about revenge that sets things right without burning what's left, subscribe, hang out, and bring a friend. I'm Hank Mercer. I was 58 when I finished this. I'll be older tomorrow. That's the deal we get if we're lucky. And And I plan to spend it making sure the next kid who learns a dovetail joint at Mercer Trade never has to learn how patience tastes at 2 a.m. in prison laundry. Sometimes the loudest payback is a bang. Mine wasn't. Mine was a quiet ledger closing with a soft click. And the only way you hear that sound is if you outlast the noise.